Warning, this podcast contains violence, sexuality, gore, and other horrible and disturbing things. Listener discretion is advised. Also, the hosts of this venture are ignorant dipshits, so please do not take anything they say as fact. And enjoy the show.
Now, are you sitting comfortably? Good. Then we'll begin.
Today we had 15 homicides and 63 violent crimes, as if that's the way it's supposed to be.
The atoms in your left hand probably came from a different star than your right hand.
It is our basic human right to be fuck up.
A second plane now has crashed into the other tower of the World Trade Center.
Putting chemicals in the water that turn the friggin' frogs gay.
The defendant shall be incarcerated for the rest of her natural life with no possibility of parole.
You are not machines. You are not cattle. You are men.
We were somewhere around Barstow, on the edge of the desert, when the drugs began to take hold.
Occultae Veritatis. Welcome to Occultae Veritatis. I'm Ood Gallifrey.
Sage Murray. I'm drunk already.
Leon Filger.
And in studio with us,
Richard Bigley.
Probably not drunk already.
Excellent.
I spent a whole week not drinking anything.
That's incredible for you.
Good.
I think that's the longest that I've not drank for at least 10 years.
Jesus Christ. She was in the hospital pushing. Pounding red wine.
Yeah, okay.
So
the longest I've not drank for 4 years, I guess then.
So this is the first episode we're recording that was requested by a $50 patron. So somebody that came in onto the Patreon paid $50 to get an episode of their choice. And they chose something called War Plan Red. And War Plan Red was the real war plan that was being put in place for America to invade Canada in 1930. And
what the fuck did we have that they wanted?
There's a bunch of stuff. And not to be out...
Rocks and trees and trees and rocks and rocks and trees and water.
And maple syrup. 25% of the fresh water on Earth.
Someone asked me if drinking this wine was a dare on Twitter. Nope. It was not.
It was just Ood buying things. But not to be outdone, 9 years earlier, in 1921, Canada made a war plan to invade America just in case. And it was called...
You can't invade us, we invade you first.
Fuck you. We'll do it first.
Surprisingly, that's the rationale, pretty much. And it was called Defense Scheme Number 1, even though it was a full-on invasion. But before we go into...
That is a real Canadian name for it.
Yeah, Defense Scheme Number 1 is going to be my name for kind of like an adult, like Jan Arden-style rock
I don't know,
group.
to me it sounds kind of like a Rush song or something, you know?
It could be a Rush song. Defense Scheme... Yeah? Okay, well, they're pretty libertarian.
Aren't they dead?
No?
Get the fuck out of here.
Yeah, so
I saw them when they were here. It was
a national treasure.
Easily the best show I've ever been at.
Yeah, so we need a little bit of weird juice to drink with this. So let's go to What's Your Poison?
So, what's your poison?
So,
what's your poison?
Yeah, so as you guys know, I don't know how many of you listen to the after show, but somebody wrote in saying that they would wish that we would do more non-alcoholic drinks because sometimes they have trouble with drinking. And you know what? As an olive branch to those of you that don't drink, we're going to do some more, I guess, non-alcoholic beverages. And
I'm drunk already, so I don't give a shit.
Yeah, and plus we're going to try to do it at the end of the night to give people a chance to sober up and all that. But we're drinking wax-gourd drink. Not wax-gourd juice, wax-gourd drink.
Does everyone have a wax-gourd drink?
Yeah.
The wax gourd, also called ash gourd, white gourd, winter gourd, tallow gourd, ash pumpkin, and winter melon.
See, winter gourd juice? That I would drink.
Oh my lord, it's terrible.
And,
holy hell.
Also called the Chinese preserving melon.
I like it. It tastes kind of like cookies.
It tastes like cantaloupe.
I like it too.
Apparently it is
Jesus,
sweetened with cane sugar and caramel. So
that's good.
Try it here.
Oh, yum.
That's so sweet.
That's vicious.
It's good. It's good, you guys. I'm gonna drink it all. I'm gonna become unsober undrunk by the end of this episode. It's
wow,
delicious.
I can feel the diabetes right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. I told you it was going to be sweet earlier.
This is like melted candy.
You're like melted candy.
It's sweetened with caramel.
Okay.
So that's what you're tasting is probably the caramel, which is where you're tasting cookies because you've probably had caramel cookies, or at least the caramelized
it's so
sugar.
bad.
So you're
I
saying
like
it
the caramelized taste.
You're saying it tastes like melted sugar because it's made of melted sugar?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, it's good.
Yuck.
Leon hates it. He
I
literally
rate it
gave his to me.
Negative 1,000 out of 10.
I might make my kid drink it. The other day, when we did the weird like drink where you drop the ball in,
Yeah.
I gave
You gave your son that drink.
I gave my son that drink, and he cried.
I believe that was
'cause
on-
he hated it so much.
I believe that was on the Nazi and the occult episode. Kind of a dark episode for like a cheery little drink.
It was really funny, but he cried, and I sent a video to our group chat, and it was really funny. Poor my kid.
And also, periodically through the episode, we're going to be smoking Can Trust Gold Kush, which has 27% THC.
Spoiler alert, I will not be smoking
Yeah, I'm not
that.
touching that.
Jesus, I'm going to be only be able to read one letter at a time on my page. That's all. I'm gonna be able to-
How does marijuana that strong exist?
It's only available by prescription.
I would imagine so.
Selective breeding.
I'm impressed that we've come up with that as a species.
Yeah. Good for us. Yeah. As long as we got to stop genocide, though. Anyways, so into the episode. Oh, wait. What do you guys rate the wax gourd juice?
I love it.
Like I said, negative 1,000.
It's good. I'm going to drink both of these.
Jesus, it's bad.
You're bad.
That's fine.
I don't know. It's some of the drinks I've had in here get better as I drink more. This is getting worse.
No, it tastes like cookies. It tastes like cold, juicy cookies.
It's gone from a 6 to a 4 as I keep on drinking it.
Oh, it's good.
It's too sweet.
You're too sweet.
Oh,
No,
that's
he's
the
not.
nicest thing you've ever said about me.
Probably. Kind of a dick.
It tastes like something.
Kay, did I tell you about that time Richard Bigley and I went to a gay club and we courted a gay couple from Nova Scotia and they bought us drinks and bought us more drinks and bought us more drinks, and then at the end of the night when they were ready to take us home and fuck us in the ass, we ran away.
You ran away?
We ran away.
There we go. No.
After having led them on all night. True, is it not?
Yeah, they invited us back to their hotel.
They
and
did.
everything, and
Booze is expensive.
We left in a hurry.
well, especially in gay clubs. Like I don't know, maybe. I mean, like some shitty like dive bar. It's like $4 or $5 a drink, but you go to a gay club and it's just like $6, $7, $8.
Yeah, it was a lot of free liquor we got.
That's just marketing, though. Anytime you cater to a specialty crowd, like your draw is going to be smaller, so you have to put your wages up.
They really wanted to tenderize our assholes.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, they wanted it so bad. And like for the record,
maybe they're more bottomish. Maybe they wanted you to like.
They're probably bottoms. Yeah,
stretch their onion
I
rings.
think one of them was a top and the other was a bottom, and it would have been some kind of awkward gay chain.
Yeah.
At any rate, Bigley sat there just drinking it like no big deal. I was the one who was fucking trolling them.
Yeah.
I was grinding them on the dance floor and trying to get, like, I was pulling the drinks. They probably didn't even want Bigley. He was just my attaché. They had to take him because I was part of the package.
Yeah.
Well, you definitely be like cuter to guys, I think.
Oh, fact. And I play like I'm bi, 50-50 bi.
Yeah.
I play gay so convincingly.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Sorry, Richard.
You're welcome, Richard Bigley, for all the free drinks I scored you.
Yeah.
I'm a
Yeah,
shameless.
it's really the only thing that I can contribute. Thanks for the free drinks.
You're welcome.
I'm a shameless flirt with like all genders, so it gets me in trouble sometimes.
I'm a shameless flirt with men. Women I'm afraid of.
I could see that.
Women intimidate me. Like not in an incel sort of way, just in a I'm intimidated by them sort of way. Gay men, though, I've got away with.
Yeah.
On that note, feel free to send your dick pics in for the next dick pic competition.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm probably collecting them.
Yeah. You thought that weird Halloween contest was a one-time thing? Fuck no. We're going to do the cosplay.
The genital cosplay contest.
The genital cosplay contest.
Snatch your cock, doesn't matter. Dress it up, send it in.
Yeah.
ovfeedback@gmail.com. We will rate it on a live show.
Yeah.
I'll look at it.
We will. Yeah, and the winner last year got a T-shirt, and then he sent us pictures of him wearing the T-shirt,
Which
and
was
else.
unsolicited.
Yeah.
Unsolicited cock that I had to look at.
I've seen so much of Richard Plum's cock.
Yeah.
Fuck.
But also he has a great podcast.
Yeah.
He has a really good podcast.
Yeah, like him and his co-host, like their podcast.
His cock, not so much.
His
Learn me
cock is
something.
very. Have you ever read The Red Queen?
No.
It's about how the human penis is designed to like scoop out other women.
Yeah. He's got a very scoopy dick.
Yeah.
He has Scooby Dick. I think he goes by Richard the Scoop Plum now.
So if you want to listen to the Richard the Scoop Plums podcast, that is
Learn me something. Yeah,
I do not care for scoop dick. That is not what does it for me at all.
No?
I like a good, healthy, like trunk of foreskin.
Trunk of Foreskin. Trunk of Foreskin is the name of my new...
I like dicks that look like portobello mushrooms.
I love it. Okay, well, that Trunk of Foreskin sounds kind of like a folk
2 inches
folk
tall,
band to me.
right around as a coffee tin.
No.
Yeah.
That wouldn't... No.
Just a big chode, you know.
I just like a pint-sized elephant trunk.
I was a reporter for the Washington Post, and I was here at the archives, and I was introduced to a gentleman named Mr. Taylor, who had been working at the archives for 60 years. So you're introduced to somebody, you make small talk. I said, well, what's the weirdest document you've seen in your 60 years here? And he didn't think for a minute. He immediately said, War Plan Red.
Lying untouched for years, Plan Red contains detailed preparations for a massive war between America and the British Empire.
Joint Army and Navy Basic War Plan Red. This is our baby.
It shows where they would fight, what troops would be needed, and how the battles would unfold.
Okay, the Red situation.
Throughout the plan, the Americans refer to themselves as blue, while the British are red.
On page 5, we've got national characteristics. The red race is essentially homogeneous, more or less phlegmatic, but I love that word, but determined and persistent when committed to a policy, and is noted for its ability to fight to a finish. I think that's a compliment, I'm not sure.
Phlegmatic Britain may have been, but they must have been doing something right. The British Empire at the beginning of the 20th century was the greatest the world had ever seen, but this did cause some resentment. We now think of Britain and America as having a special relationship. After all, they did fight side by side in 2 world wars. But at the start of the 20th century, the 2 countries had been at each other's throats for well over 100 years, and much of the fighting had taken place in the British Dominion of Canada.
Okay, so today we're talking about, really a story of USA, Britain, and Canada through the 1800s and into the World War I and approaching World War II. Now,
Canada.
Oh,
Blame Canada.
Oh, yeah, Kate.
With all their hockey hullabaloo and that bitch Anne Murray too. Blame Canada. Blame Canada. They're not even a real country anyway.
Because the country is gonna ride. Tomorrow night, these freaks will fry.
Oh, you're doing...
Tomorrow night, our lives will change.
Tomorrow night, we'll be entertained.
An execution.
What a sight.
Tomorrow night, up there is so much room where babies
Where
burn
the
and flowers bloom. Up
Tomorrow
there,
night, up there is doomed. Someone will be coming
soon.
Suck your fucking face, Uncle Fucker.
You're a boner-biting bastard, Uncle Fucker.
You're a boner biter, I must say. Well, you fucked your uncle yesterday. Uncle Fucker, that's you. I need to watch that movie again. It's been too many years.
I used to watch, have that. Okay.
Can we legally stitch in that song?
Probably not.
So trouble between Britain and America started with the American Revolutionary War. So basically, the Americans were starting to rebel and making problems for the British colonies and all that. The British people want their colonies to be well behaved. They want them to grow their shit and send their taxes, not cause an uproar. And, if they start causing trouble, they're going to put more and more aggressive restrictions on them. And
aggressive Restrictions is the name of my new adult rock band.
So the theme of the American Revolutionary War was no taxation without representation, which means that don't tax us if you're not in our government. Like, you're not representing us. We're not going to send cash to you if you're not part of the government representing us. Because a lot of the taxes were being sent away to Britain and never being put back into America.
Right.
And when people started to uprise, and this is around 1783, the British put more and more restrictions down on Americans. They started taxing imports and exports heavier, so that means American manufacturers and businessmen had to pay more out of pocket. They restricted town meetings and protests. So when Americans tried to organize and tried to like gain political movements by having meetings and protests and all that, they were interrupted or stopped. They opened and closed ports to hurt trade as punishment. So they would just surprise on a whim close a port, and if you had like a boat full of supplies, it would just have to float out there for as long as the British wanted to keep the port closed for. Any British citizens who committed crime in America were sent back to Britain to be prosecuted, and they were often just given a slap on the wrist. And the most egregious one is in cities that were British occupied, every American home had to have a British troop or two in it, like inside the home sleeping there. And that was the thing that like nothing can hide when you have a British troop inside of every American home kind of thing.
No.
Yeah. And so they were getting pretty restrictive. And basically, that's what started the American Revolutionary War. They wanted to like throw off Britain and throw off the colonies and gain their independence. And it resulted in 17,000 Americans killed and 20,000 taken prisoner and 24,000 killed on the British side. Funny enough, just to show you how things flip, in 1783 when the war was taking place, the people that were helping Britain, so the soldiers that Britain was hiring and using, were Haitians, which were proto-Germans.
Right.
So in that war, the Germans and the British like banded together to fight America. It's weird how things flip through the centuries.
Oh boy.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, America won that war, and in the aftermath, they went through something called the Paris Treaty. The Paris Treaty went very well for America, but very bitterly for Britain. Like, America won the war, Britain was a bit bruised and, like, low on money, and they kind of had to take what was given to them, and they got kind of beaten around. And to show you how bitter they were, if you look up 1783 unfinished painting, there's a painting where instead of taking pictures of, like agreements like they do in modern politics, they had paintings of people sitting together for grand truces and agreements. In that painting, you have the Americans sitting down on their half of the painting, and the other half of the painting is blank, because after the agreements, the British people basically like took their cookies and went home and said, fuck you and your painting. Yeah, we don't want to be in it. Yeah, so that's how bitter they were. And also, America wanted a lot, so they were pushing how far they could get. So they wanted the 13 colonies, which are what America is right now. They also wanted Newfoundland, Quebec, Nova Scotia, Rupert's Land, which is like a huge part of Canada.
Yeah.
PEI and St. John's. Basically,
have they been to St. John's?
Oh yes. Oh no, I think it was better back then. It was a major shipping port.
Bleak.
These days, yeah,
I've never been there.
Yeah. So if the British would have given that up, if those treaties if that Paris Treaty would have gotten even more fucked, we would be part of the USA right now. But
that sucks.
But the British kind of stood up to it and said, okay, you can have your 13 colonies, you can have your land. We're not giving you like British-owned Canada.
Right.
We're not giving you all that stuff.
Yeah.
And that's when the tension started to rise in that, because ever since then, America has been fighting to gain more land back on Canada. A lot of war generals and war hawks through like the 1800s talked about how Canada was like the lost American land. Like, we almost had it, but then the British took it away, and it's really ours because we won the war, damn it. And another reason they wanted it is because during the Revolutionary War, Britain used Canada as a staging ground to like organize troops before they sent them into America. So they didn't want to have that like ally to the north that was just going to help somebody who's went to war with them before.
Right.
Yeah. But anyways, the British gave up the 13 colonies. America became America. Proto-Canada was still Proto-Canada. Right after those agreements started to take place, the bantering between like America and Britain started, and it's like they're batting around Canada like a tennis ball. So a general once said, taking Canada is a matter of marching. And he was pretty arrogant, because at the time there was 50 million people in the USA and there was 500,000 people in Canada.
Yeah.
And he figured, like, if we march up there with a big force, like, we just have to occupy and they're going to hand it over. And that was kind of the attitude. And the only reason they didn't go forward with that is because they didn't want to create another expensive war with Britain and all that.
Yeah, well, that's fair.
Yeah, but it didn't last long because the War of 1812 happened. So the War of 1812 was another contention between USA and Canada. Basically, the Napoleonic Wars were happening, so Napoleon was fighting his wars, and as part of it, to kind of restrict France, because France and Britain were fighting, Britain cut off trade to France, tried to, like, starve them, like a war of attrition kind of style.
Right.
And America, since they were like, America from the start has been a very like capitalist, like money building country. He says, obviously. Yeah. And from there, they're like, okay, we don't want to make any enemies here. We're just going to have open trade with everybody. And of course, when you do that in international politics without thinking about like the ramifications, you made an enemy because now you're financing France, who's an enemy of Britain. So of course, Britain went to war with America because they were supplying the enemy. It ended up with 25,000 people dead, and on multiple sides. And there was a whole bunch of knocks back and forth. Like the British came in 1814 and burned down parts of Washington, including the first White House.
Oh,
Oops.
boy.
Yeah. Yeah, so there's even a song, and I think there's... when was it written? I think it was written in 1937. So I think it might be public domain.
Cool.
I'll put a little clip of it here. In 1814, we took a little trip, that whole thing.
In 1814,
I think that was released by the Arrogant Worms, wasn't it?
Oh, it was covered by the Arrogant Worms.
Yeah. Took a little bacon and we took a little beans and we fought the bloody battle of the town of New Orleans.
We fired our guns and the British kept it coming.
Wasn't quite as many as there was a while ago. Fired once more and they began to run down the Mississippi to the mighty above Mexico.
They ran through the forest, they ran through the rivers, they ran through the blah, 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 blah.
We used to be...
Through the 1800s, Britain and America kept on slapping back at each other. And, like, they started fights over the stupidest, littlest shit. Like, okay, so there was this tree dispute between lumberjacks in Maine and New Brunswick. So basically, the lines that were drawn after the Treaty of France, basically the map maker didn't do the math right, and there's a lot of dispute in the area between Canada and the U.S. It's been cleared up now. But in that time, there was like a gray area.
Okay.
And that was creating a lot of fighting. So these lumberjacks basically started assaulting and murdering each other because they were taking each other's trees. And like at a time where you were paid by the tree and you had to bring in a quality tree to get paid, like you didn't want your neighbor from the north, your neighbor from the south stealing your fucking tree. Yeah.
Fucking tree thieves.
Oh yeah.
Tree thieves.
Yeah, so this turned into something called the Pork and Beans War. So a dispute between... So this was two companies of lumberjacks. So a dispute between 80 or so people turned into an armed conflict with 50,000 troops and $266 million of funding.
What?
It was only negotiations at the last minute that kept war from totally breaking out. And basically, U.S. had to give up a big chunk of New Brunswick just to keep the peace. Like, okay, and what happened was the 80 or so lumberjacks from the American side charged the Canadian side and tried to take over the town that was there and was quickly arrested by the Canadian military.
That's silly.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. This one is even worse. Okay, so, and by the way, there's a whole bunch of tiny little conflicts. So I'm just picking out, like, the stupidest one just to see, like, how high tensions are and how willing these two nations are to fight. The Pig War. This is in San Juan Island, which is kind of in between Victoria and Vancouver.
I've been. It's very nice.
Yeah. And it was in the gray area again. And so there was disputes, and it was a very nice island, and it's very nicely situated, and it has strategic things for some reason. It's a very valuable island.
Salmon.
Salmon?
Oh, yeah, probably.
Salmon. That could be. Yeah, because there's a big industry around that. But basically, there was British people and American people living in there. And one of the things British people did is they kept pigs in their gardens. Because it was a part of British culture back then to raise pigs in their gardens and all that. So a British pig broke into an American's garden, and the Americans shot the pig dead. There was a little argument between the two neighbors about who was responsible and who should pay for the pig. Like, was it the British person's fault for letting the pig run free, or was the American's fault for just like not thinking and shooting the pig too fast? Or like,
I don't know.
Sounds like a Gerald Stanley Colton Bushey case.
Not even though. Like, keep your shit inside if they're not supposed to be outside. I'm all about keeping cats inside. Keep your cats inside.
Keep your cats inside.
Like, I don't know, like, pigs are like toddlers, so I don't know, like, I'd keep my 4-year-old inside.
I think you keep your pig inside.
Like, keep it contained.
Yes.
Don't just let it roam free.
Somebody comes over, kills, like, not a beloved pet of yours, but kind of just like a feed animal of yours, like a chicken or something.
Yeah.
If you don't form that kind of connection to chickens, of course.
I do.
You think that kind of thing would be fairly easily solved.
Yeah.
Basically, that gave the local government there an excuse to escalate things, saying that like British were starting to encroach on Americans and all that. And it broke out into an almost war again with 5 warships, 2,000 men, and 78 cannons.
Oh my God.
It resulted in the island being split in 2. And if you look at the post-Pig War placement of the bases, it's like toddlers that hate each other in a room. One is way on the one corner of the island, way is one on the other corner of the island. That they could not put their bases farther apart. So they just took their toys and went home and went to separate corners of the island.
That's hilarious.
Yeah. So 1866, a bunch of Irish Americans, about 800 of them, basically wanted to use Canada as hostage to trade for Ireland, because Ireland was still under control of the British Crown at that time. Mm-hmm. And basically they were thinking, okay, if we invade Canada and we take ownership of it, we can trade it for a free Ireland.
And free Ireland.
Yep. Basically, so it started out with 800 troops. And it would have been a little conflict. Like, it would have been much like the Lumberjacks. Like, there would be a little troop of people. The Canadian Army would have arrested them. That's where it would have ended.
Right.
The American government took that as an excuse to fund, educate, and provide weapons to these people. And also to send propaganda around to make sure that they had some more recruitment methods. Mm-hmm. And the American president was asked several times whether he knew about this, and he never, ever, ever knew that it was going on, even though there was evidence that he gave out certain orders. And it wasn't until these Irish Americans started killing people and started like committing really bad crimes up in Canada that he actually spoke out against it. So you see rising tensions all the time. Mm-hmm. And then World War I happened.
I'm Indy Nidell. Welcome to a Great War special episode of The Great War in Numbers. The destructive power of the technologies used in the First World War was devastating like never before in history, and this power increased exponentially as the war went on. In no area was this more obvious than in the use of artillery. Artillery was comparatively rudimentary at the beginning of the war, but the continued development of gun design, ranging technology, counter barrages, tactical deployment, and the innovations in artillery design all contributed to increase the deadly efficiency of artillery. But what really increased the body count was the enormous increase in the sheer amount of artillery. For example, at Champagne and Artois in 1915, the French expended 8 million shells over 2 months along a 50-kilometer front. That's about 30 miles. Over a similar time span, a similar 2-month time span, 2 years later, at Chemin des Dames, the French poured 19 million shells into a 40-kilometer front, only 25 miles. The Battle of Verdun, however, has become famous, or infamous, for the heavy use of artillery. The German plan was to shell the French into oblivion, and to prepare for that, the German army amassed enough ammunition to fire 2 million shells from 1,200 guns in only 6 days, and a further 2 million shells in the ensuing 12 days. Now this required, as you might imagine, a huge amount of preparation. In the lead up to battle, over 30 trains a day were scheduled to offload shells behind the German lines. The battle began on February 21st, 1916, with roughly 1 million shells being fired into the French lines during just a 10-hour bombardment.
World War I started in 1914. America was neutral for years. Again, they were playing the capitalists. They were trading with all allies, and they were paid for a lot of the British supplies.
And they were selling millions of dollars worth of aspirin to all the other troops on both sides.
Oh yeah. They were doing the capitalist shit, and they were especially like propping Britain up. Like they were letting Britain borrow as much money as they could because Britain wanted to keep on chugging forward. They seen themselves as the Iron Gate of Europe and all that, and Britain's going to be the Iron Gate that holds back the curtain and all that shit. Oh, in 1917, a top secret message was intercepted where Germany was hypothetically talking to Mexican military people in order to take America. Now, it was revealed later that Germans weren't really serious about this. They weren't actually going to send people down to Mexico to help them out. They're just trying to spring an insurgence in Mexico against America to cripple it a little bit, to give it some distractions, like a and the enemy of my enemy is my friend kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah. Of course, so since Germany went in with Mexico, then it became America's problem. Okay, you involved us, now we're going to get to go in. So the war started in 1914. America didn't go in until 1917. I think it's important to talk about, like, with these two nations for the next part, like, how much they sacrificed in the First World War. So America lost 117,000 people out of 106 million, which was 0.1% of their population. Britain lost 1.1 million people out of 42 million, which is 3.8% of their population. They also had 16% of their population maimed and injured. Imagine 16% of your entire population, and mostly young, healthy young men being crippled.
Who hadn't yet been killed by the Spanish flu.
Yeah. Call back the Spanish flu. Well, depending on episode release. I don't know yet.
Not 100% on that yet.
Yeah. So it basically ended up with America kind of coming in late and being allowed to be counted among the winners, even though they held off for years not helping. And that created some tensions in Britain.
They always do that, though, isn't that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
They did have the Second World War. They didn't want to do shit about the Second World War until Japan fucked with them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there was post-World War I tensions. And something was brought about by something called the Dreadnought Leviathan ships. So these were these giant warships, and they were so above class, the lower class of warships, that some generals described it as like a jousting match versus a tank.
Okay.
Like, basically, the old style of warship versus these new dreadnoughts were like a horse versus a tank.
Yeah.
That's just that level above. And
Like, you can't even compare them, basically.
Yeah, so...
Because the dreadnoughts had massive cannons that no one had ever seen before on the open seas.
They had 10 45 caliber 12-inch guns that fired 850-pound shells at 800 meters a second. They also have 27 13-pound 50 caliber bullets. So these are 13 caliber bullet rounds that have, I think, 6-inch barrel holes, and they fire 13-pound bullets.
Barrel holes.
So, these bullets.
The barrel holes are your shitty old country western group.
Yeah, barrel holes. Yeah, that definitely sounds like a shitty country western group.
Oh yeah, and
nice one, Leon.
You're welcome.
And like each one of these bullets is about roughly the size of like a straighted out banana. Well, let's be honest, it's the size of an average cock. Let's say that. Except
no banana. Okay, straightened out banana is the name of my new pop punk group.
Okay, so we'll go straightened out banana. So a straightened out metal banana that weighs 13 pounds going at 800 meters a second.
There's no way my dick weighs 13 pounds.
Well, if it was made of lead, it might be.
Okay, yeah, fair enough.
Yeah. Yeah. It also had 5 18-inch torpedo tubes that were capable of firing like massive explosions. So these dreadnoughts were so high class and so like imposing that naval warfare became very much about how many dreadnoughts you owned. Like that was the top line. And it's kind of like nukes, like that war's version of nukes. Like if you had dreadnoughts, it's like having nukes back then. Before the war, Britain had 35, Germany had 20, and the USA had 25. After the war, Germany's ships were torn apart for metal. They wanted to punish the German Navy, so they tore apart all their dreadnoughts and melted that shit down.
Oh no.
The USA had 25, and they had plans to build 15 more. Britain was broke from the war. They didn't have any money to build new ones, and soon they would become the second highest naval power in the world. That was extremely threatening to a nation that built its shit on naval power. Yeah, and what was making it worse is America was kind of being like a shady banker. Like, you know how like a banker will allow somebody to borrow more money than they can logically pay back, like predatory credit card companies and stuff like that. They ended up letting Britain borrow $22 billion, which is $308 billion today.
Wow.
To show you how big this was, at the time, the entire GDP of Britain was $23 billion.
Wow.
So if they donated their entire GDP of 1 year, they could pay it off. So America was demanding to be paid back because America was very pragmatic and capitalist. They're like, hey, you have dues, you have deadlines, you need to pay that shit back. You agreed to it. And Britain was like, 16% of our population is injured, another 3.8% of it is dead. Like, we're suffering like a cultural crisis where our country's being torn apart and we're suffering like group psychosis of war, and you're bullying us about paying the bill. And the two sides started, the media of the two sides started winding up these images of each other. Britain saw the USA as greedy and heartless.
Yeah.
Like, we just got beaten in war, and now you're bullying us about money. Britain saw US as ungrateful and a deal breaker. Because US stepped in, they helped out Britain by borrowing money all throughout the war, and they're like, hey, we helped prop your country up, and now you're being a deal breaker by not paying it back. And in, like, American citizens and British citizens, like, at the time, were feeling the same tensions that kind of, like, but it's sort of like the relationship between China and Canada or Russia and Canada right now, just kind of
the whole Huawei thing.
Yeah. Just kind of hidden motives and tension, and people like worried and all that, and like that started to grow and grow. So in 1921, Canada made Defense Scheme Number 1, which was the planned imaginary war with America, and you got it very much right off the start. Basically, the rationale was, okay, war with America seems imminent-ish. So we may as well make a plan.
It looks what?
It looks imminent-ish.
Oh, okay.
It's not totally imminent. It's like
right,
80%
it's
imminent.
Yeah.
Imminent-ish.
Yeah.
Imminent-ish.
Imminent-ish.
Yeah.
I was looking at my phone.
That's a Webster's dictionary word, right? Imminent-ish.
Yeah.
No, I like it. No, it's a Nude Gallagher word.
Listen to this.
Nude Gallagher.
Oh my God, Kate, I've been watching Shameless way too much.
I'm not crushing no watermelon. But like, now listen to this guy's name, because I have to say it once, but it's fantastic. So the guy that planned Defense Scheme Number 1 was named Brigadier General James Buster Brown.
Buster.
Yeah, Brigadier General James Buster Brown.
Buster Brown. That sounds kind of like one of those Urban Dictionary dirty sex type of.
Wasn't Buster Brown where you could buy like high-end kids' shoes?
I had a cousin who had a dog named Buster that shit on the carpet all the time.
I'm pretty
so
sure
the
that
carpet
Buster
was
Brown.
probably Buster Brown, eh?
No. Okay, I'm pretty sure that Buster Brown was like a shoe store. I'm Googling it right now.
And he has some goofy as shit photos of him, like, information gathering for this. So he planned for an invasion of the U.S. the same way I would. And I would think, like, a brigadier general would have better ideas than I did, but, like, I guess not. He put on a disguise.
I was right.
He put on a disguise which included a big hat, a fake mustache, and big fake eyeglasses, and he pretended to be an American citizen in American cities, asking questions and taking notes and taking pictures of bridges and stuff and all.
Like Sacha Baron Cohen?
A little bit. Yeah, he basically put on a disguise. He's like, hello, fellow Americans. Yes, freedom, freedom, freedom. By the way, where's your nearest bridge and monuments and all that? And he would write shit down. And basically, and he had some funny quotes from his observations, because he was very blunt and all that. He described men of Vermont as fat and lazy, yet pleasant and congenital.
Congenial.
Congenial. What does that mean?
Congenital.
Congenital's like how you pass along diseases. Congenial's like pleasant.
Yeah.
I have to pee. I'll be
So they're
right back.
pleasant.
Congenital.
Yeah, and they also said if he also said if Americans aren't lazy, then they sure have a passion for rests and gossip. I'm sorry. I have to poke a little bit. Okay, but basically, he came up with a plan that included targeting the cities of Maine, Detroit, Fargo, Seattle, Spokane, Portland, Niagara, Great Falls, and the Great Lakes, all the big cities around the Great Lakes, on the American side. And he basically thought of this as the war plan. Basically, he wanted to go into America, hit these cities fast and hard. He wanted to go in like a bee and come out like a butterfly, and that's how he described it. So he would flash raid America as quick as possible and hit all these cities and just overwhelm them with a huge amount of Canadian troops that just come out of nowhere. And then after everything was devastated and taken over, they would retreat, and on the way back, they would blow up all the major roads, bridges, railways, and transportation centers. That way, America's distracted rebuilding all their infrastructure, and the Canadians can wait the 13 days it will take for the British troops, British reinforcement to arrive. And then they can push their way back into America.
Intelligence, lazy Virginians, something or other.
Yeah, so Brigadier General James Buster Brown, he put on a funny hat, he put on like a fake mustache, he put on big glasses, and in disguise as an American, he went into Vermont and America, all the places he wanted to hit, and he scoped them out, and he kind of wrote down all the major bridges and train stations, and basically all the major areas that could be sabotaged.
Right.
Like Valentine, strawberry.
Oh yeah.
Get out of here.
So defense scheme number 1 had 4 steps. Okay, so step 1, lightning raids. So he wanted to rush into a bunch of American cities, including Maine, Detroit, Fargo, Seattle, Spokane, Portland, Niagara, Great Falls, and some other ones. Basically, they were major areas of Northern America, like routes that the military would use to get to Canada.
Right.
And basically, when they rushed in and took over these cities, step 2 was blow up any bridges, transportation centers, factories, roads, railroads, trains, anything like that. Anything that can move troops or have troops move on it, they blew up, or they would blow up.
Right.
Step 3, hold the line for 13 days until British reinforcements arrive. The British needed 13 days to amass 60,000 troops. About. So if they could hold the line for 13 days with all these broken-ass bridges distracting the Americans, when the British shows up, they can just rush down with the new British reinforcements.
Okay.
Step 4 was just the British part, where they would have the British destroyers. So the British, I forgot what their name was.
Dreadnought.
Yeah, the British dreadnoughts would go up and down the ports, and America has a lot of big, populous port cities.
Right.
Like in Florida, New York, and all that. Like a lot of the big cities are right on the ports, right near. So they would basically go up and using those giant ass guns, they would just start shelling the shit out of these American cities. And these 60K troops that they're bringing in on short notice would be from India, Australia, all the European allies, Russia, all that stuff.
All the colonies.
Yeah. This didn't go forward. Brigadier General James Buster Brown retired. His successor, Andrew McNaughton, thought it was a real dumb idea to start planning this. So he burned all the copies. He didn't burn all the copies, apparently, because it made it. But he destroyed all the copies that he could, and he tried to make his generals forget about it as an option. So nothing really happened until there was an armistice agreement in 1927. So, like I said, naval warfare was gearing up, and all these new dreadnoughts were being built. And these dreadnoughts could lay waste to a city from miles away off port.
Right.
So they were dangerous things to have in an area, and they wanted to take control of it, and they wanted to start restricting how many of these things countries could have and where they could move them, because who wants to be within striking range of one of these things?
No one.
Yeah. Yeah, so... But that's kind of pissed off the Americans, because this is how they're going to get the edge. This is how they're going to beat out, like, the naval colony. Like, they wanted to make the sun set on the British Empire. They wanted to be those people. So they thought if they went to war with Britain, if they didn't take over Canada in 13 days and hold it down, the British would arrive in 13 days with 60,000 troops. Canada would have Britain and Canada, so they'd have all the people, and America would just have money and resources, and it'd be a giant stalemate. It'd be like the Western Front all over again, just like barely moving, lots of deaths. It would be like the Battle of Verdun again. It would be just stupid amount of death with no ground gained.
Right, kind of pointless.
Yeah, so they wanted to avoid that, and they came up with a similar but different idea. So Canada wanted to bust up just the northern bridges so that they would create some like wiggle room between Canada and America, so the Americans would never make it to Canada in 13 days. America wanted to come in and break down Canada enough that they could take it over within 13 days and then make the British fight from the sea, which is going to be hard for one reason. So they targeted Halifax, the Great Lakes, Vancouver, Winnipeg, and the Bahamas, which aren't Canada, but they were part of the plan.
Okay.
So, step 1.
Because they were owned by the British at the time, and we were talking about expropriating them.
Yeah.
Okay.
Pretty much.
How could you target Manitoba?
You're going to find out.
Okay.
So Halifax was the major port in the area. So that's where most of the people, supplies, all that came in. Like, that's where all like the trade stuff was there. So, all the trade agreements and all the math and taxes and like industry around that was all built around Halifax. Halifax was a huge hub. Okay. So they wanted to rush in there. Step 1 was to deploy poison gas all over Halifax.
Oh boy.
They basically wanted to kill most citizens that didn't own a gas mask, so that the city could be taken over very quick. Because that was the sink point. Like, if the British were to bring people in 13 days, that's where they would bring them. So they got to get that city fast. They got to grab it fast.
Right.
So one point was Halifax. The reason that it would be a good thing is that you guys know about D-Day, like the Americans rushing like the French shores and being just shelled like fuck by Germans.
Yeah.
It's because planning an assault from the sea where you're advancing into a well-placed armament, it's going to have massive losses. Like, there's been no war plan developed that can go through that and not have massive losses.
Genital herpes.
Oh, maybe.
Infect them from behind.
There you go. Oh boy, there's enough room to do an episode on STIs in the World War because they were a huge problem.
Oh, venereal disease was like the second biggest killer behind getting shot.
Yeah, things got fucked. Things literally got anyway. The next up was the Great Lakes. So the Great Lakes, because there was so much water and industry and water, and like people could have boats to bring in fish and oil, and like there was a whole bunch of industry surrounding it. So a lot of Canada's wealth and money and commerce was based around the Great Lakes at that time. Right. So if you took that, you would deprive Canada of a lot of its resources. And in this area was a lot of the places where military stuff was built because there was lots and lots of fresh water that could be used to, and almost everything manufactured has water in some step. Right. Yeah, so it's important to have it. So you would cut off the resources. Next up, Vancouver. So the British would come to Halifax, but British allies, India and Australia, would come in the Vancouver port. Mm-hmm. So you had to stop the Allies from getting in because they were only a few other months off. Oh, I forgot. They need to take over Canada, all of Canada, within 6 months. Okay. Because according to the war games they sought out, and according to the information gathering they did, they figured that Britain could amass about 3.8 million troops and get them into Canada fighting ready in 6 months. So they had to get Canada in 6 months, or else Britain was going to just fuck them with this massive mound of troops.
Right. See, I always thought that it would be that they would die off over the winter if they didn't get it in 6 months.
Oh, here we go.
Like Russia.
Got to hit it in the summer. Yeah. Now, so they cut off Vancouver because they didn't want the Indian and Australian reinforcements to come in there. And they also cut off the...
That's what she said.
Oh, yeah. They also cut off the Prince Rupert train station. The Prince Rupert train station was... never eat soggy wieners. Was a Western hub. Yeah, I did that.
Wasn't it never eat shredded wheat?
I don't know. It's a Western hub for the Canadian Railway Station. So a lot of Canadian rail began at the Prince Rupert train station, so they want to take that over.
Is that in BC, Prince Rupert?
Yep.
Okay.
Now, the reason they wanted Winnipeg, you're like, why the fuck would they go to
why
Winnipeg?
would you want
trains?
Winnipeg?
It's because
for like burning tires.
Winnipeg was the hub for the trains for the entire western half of the country.
Right.
If you took over Winnipeg and shut down the trains, you essentially cut Canada in half.
That sucks.
Okay.
Yeah. Have you been to Winnipeg? It's fucking bleak.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I totally believe what you're saying.
Like, they could, like, that operation could go down without a single loss on the American side, and it would still be sad because they're in Winnipeg.
Bigley and I took a trip to Winnipeg. I drove me and Bigley and a couple other dudes to Winnipeg, and we suffered there. We fucking suffered and got high on mediocre weed.
Yeah.
If you want a song about Winnipeg, I'd recommend
One Great City by the Weaker Thans.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
I also did my basic training near Winnipeg, so it doesn't have the happiest. Yeah, anyways. Yes, they also want to take over the Bahamas because the Bahamas would be used as a staging area to amass British troops, just like Canada was to attack America from the south, and they wanted to prevent that.
I'm gonna attack you from the south.
Yeah. Oh boy. Yeah, and basically what they wanted to do is they wanted to get into Canada, they wanted to control the ports, and they basically wanted to buckle down and hold tight until Britain gave up Canada. And they think they didn't think that Britain would spend the blood it would take to take back Canada.
Okay.
And it turns out they were kind of right.
Yeah, like why would you want it?
Yeah. So, and this isn't all theoretical. Like, when I talk about them gearing up to war, the plans were starting to be made. Right along the Canadian border, there's something called Fort Drum. Fort Drum, before all these war plans started being drawn up, was like the 28th largest base in America. Wow. Within 6 years, it became the biggest base in America by a wide margin. On a clear day with no fog, Fort Drum is close enough to Canada that it could wave at Canadians across the highway.
Cool.
And it was also right by the ports of Halifax and right by the little intersection of the Great Lakes. So the Great Lakes and Halifax would be taken over by Fort Drum. So you can see they're already amassing troops to plan for that.
Yeah.
By 1939, it became the biggest military base in all of America.
Holy shit.
Yeah, the most populous base. war games were conducted. Of course, the soldiers weren't told who they were fighting. They were fighting a theoretical enemy. But some interviews done later show that they were fighting an enemy that had an awful lot of defense strategies and plans. They were close to taking over some Canadian cities and stuff like that. And it seemed like they were being practiced to attack Canadians. There was also a bunch of camouflage runways found. Now, camouflage runways, you take a giant hard plastic runway, and it has to be, a runway has to be thousands of feet long.
Yes.
And so it's a big thing, but so it's expensive to put one of these down. But basically, they put one of these down, and then they walk away, and they let grass grow for a couple years, and it just looks like a grassy field, but it has that hard plastic underneath, so you can effectively take off and land with airplanes. And they had those right along the Canadian border, ready to go. And they weren't pointed in a strategic way where you could go towards the coast. They were middle land America, where they had fuck all else to do except go right into belly Canada.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, Britain, of course, when this was discovered many years later, in 1976, said that we wouldn't have spent the blood to take it. We would have let USA have Canada, but it's easy to say that in 1976 because in that time, like Britain and Canada were seen very much, or Britain, Canada, and US were seen very much as allies still.
Yeah.
Like they just went through the world wars together, and it was kind of like a hardship that
they shared,
galvanized them.
Yeah, they're like friends.
Yeah, like I guess every nation on Earth is kind of like a frenemy. Yeah, a little bit. Like before World War I, war was much more seen as like a very romantic thing. Like it was seen as a romantic thing to go off and die in war.
Like the Boer War.
Yeah, it was seen as a noble thing. But after, like, you can see it in art and media and writings and paintings. War became seen as this twisted meat grinding machine, just this tragedy of humanity. Like the opinion totally flipped. So Britain very much did not want to spend the blood again. 16% of its people were fucked. Yeah. Like 3% of them were dead, and they were all mostly healthy young men. Mm-hmm. And they didn't want to go through that again. Now, were they posturing because it was 1976 and it's easy to say that, or would they have let U.S. have Canada? The only thing that prevented it was a little man named Hitler and the rise of the Nazi Party.
Right.
And they started to get active enough that Britain called in, and then U.S. started to fund the Allies. Now, of course, the U.S. funded a whole bunch of things on a whole bunch of sides in World War II, but for the most part, like food, water, bullets, they funded the Allies, that kind of thing. So they started to form a partnership, and as those troops started to fight together more and more often, like British next to American next to Canadian troops, that galvanized them as allies. Right. And that's what brought them together as the current form of America. So I really think with the rising tensions and how much they were preparing, I really think the U.S. would have or may have gone to war and annexed Canada in the 1940s if World War II did not break out.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I'll be damned.
Yeah. And of course, I'm just some jackass that spent like 10 hours reading this on Wikipedia, so you can tell me to fuck off. That's fine. Oh, by the way, War Plan Red was the theoretical plan to take over Canada. Just as an ending to this episode, these are all the other colors. Because in peace times in the 1920s, when there's not war going on, the war generals have to have something to do, so they come up with hypothetical war games. War Plan Green was Mexico. War Plan White was a civil war, so how to crush another civil war in America. War Plan Indigo was Iceland.
Iceland.
Yeah. War Plan Brown was the Philippines.
Oh, I hate to be War Plan Brown.
Yeah. Did you know that code brown in the hospital code systems is a hazardous material spill?
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Is it shit?
It could be shit.
Okay.
Code brown.
Code tan is Cuba. I see a theme here. Yeah. Early 1900s America. That makes sense. Okay. Plan Gold was France. Plan Black was Germany. Plan Orange was Japan. Plan Violet was Latin America. And Plan Purple was South America. Oh. Yeah. So they had contingency plans in peace times to basically go to war with any other country on Earth. And by the way, I excluded the grand list. They had plans drawn up to go to war with everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but the Canadian one was the one thing where they started making plans. Yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah. With Occultae Veritatis, I'm Wood Gallifrey.
Sage Murray cutting up a piece of plastic.
Yeah.
Leon Filger.
And in studio with us,
Richard Bigley.
Have a good night.
Love you, bye.
Cheers.
Alrighty, yeah, little known historical facts about the history between Canada, the US, the UK, and, all others involved. Hope you enjoyed it. To play us out, we have the artist Room for a Ghost and their track, number 2. Enjoy and see you in the after show. Alrighty, so the gentleman who does our disclaimer at the start of the show has his own podcast, and he was lovely enough to both make an ad for his podcast and ours, our Patreon to be precise. So I'm going to play that for you now for the after show. His podcast is called Talking Books and Stuff, where he interviews authors about their creative process and whatever else pops into his head. So, Ice D, take it away.
Hey there, to you and yours. This is the legendary DR, also known as Ice D, also known as Dan West. That's 2 N's. The second N is silent. Also known as DR the History Guy. Also known as the host of a podcast that's really good. It's called Talking Books and Writing and Stuff. And you can find it somewhere. And I'm sure Ood will figure out how to post that. And we've had lots of interesting stories. What I do is, I'm good at this. That's the only thing I'm good at, is interviewing authors and such. And so I've talked to Meg Tilly, actress, author, actor actually. I hate the word actress. She was in Psycho 2. She was in Bomb Girls. War Machine is on Netflix right now, and she writes books. And we talked to her, and we also talked to Gail Bowen from Regina, and we also have a harrowing interview with Kamal Dillon about domestic abuse, and it's scary, but it's worth listening to because my gosh, she's a wonderful person. And lots more. And if you become a Patreon subscriber of mine, I don't know how you do that. I can't figure it out. Ood can tell you. I will eat a bug after I get 10 supporters. And also, if you want to support these dipshits, Ood and Sage and Leon, whatever the F his name is, like where the F did Leon Filger come out? Who knows? And Richard Bigley, the greatest person on the face of the earth. Sage Murray, she's so beautiful, and Ood is so creative. Like, they're all wonderful folks. So if you want to support them, like for the cost of a cup of coffee, same with me, $5, $10 a month, whatever. I mean, how much you spend on cigarettes or dope or whatever, you can give us a couple bucks so we can keep these things going. So that's the Occultae Veritatis. And also Talking Books and Writing and Stuff. 2 great podcasts that are out there right now. Come on, right now. Operators are standing by. You can give them a cut. No, anyway, that's what fake radio announcers do. I'm a real radio announcer. You can tell my FM voice because I am the morning DJ on WOLD. Anyway, no, seriously, these guys are great. They're family. We love them all. My wife, Leon Filger's mother, and we won't mention her name because we don't want to mention Leon's name or my name. It's different. Anyway, they're wonderful people. Sage, so beautiful and so kind and smart. Leon, oh, he's my hero. He's so smart. So smart. Smart. Everybody there is smarter than me. Ood, he's a technical wizard. He's almost as good as Richard Bigley. Richard is my guiding muse. All of them. They're wonderful. They're great. Please support them. Call now. Operators are standing by. But wait, there's more. Call now. Even more operators are standing by. No, we don't have a phone number. Go online. Figure it out. You can do it. You're smart. Thank you.